February of 1978, five friends from Northern California set out on what should have been a simple trip. They were heading to a college basketball game in Nevada, a short drive they had made before, with plans to return home that same night. They never came back. What followed was one of the most confusing and unsettling missing persons cases in American history. A mystery involving abandoned cars, frozen mountains, strange decisions, and unanswered questions that remain unsolved decades later. This is the story of the Yuba County Five. The five men were all from the small town of Yuba City, California, and they were close friends who spent much of their free time together. They were known throughout their community as gentle, friendly, and reliable. Gary Matthias was 25 years old. He was the most independent of the group and had previously served in the military. Gary struggled with schizophrenia, but by all accounts, his condition was well managed through medication, and he functioned independently. Jack Hewitt was 24 years old and known for his calm demeanor and love of sports. He lived with his parents and worked a steady job, rarely missing commitments. William Bill Sterling was 29 years old and deeply attached to routine. He lived with his parents and was described as cautious, even anxious, especially when situations deviated from what he expected. Ted Weher was 32 years old, the oldest of the group. Ted also lived with his parents and relied heavily on structure. He had a heart condition and was sensitive to stress. Jack Madruga was 30 years old and was considered the leader of the group. He owned the car that night, a turquoise Mercury Montego, and was known for his responsibility and reliability. All five men were scheduled to play in a basketball tournament the following day, and they were known for taking their commitments seriously. None of them had a history of running away or engaging in risky behavior, which is what made what happened next so difficult to understand. On the evening of February 24th, 1978, the five men drove from Yuba City to Chico, California to attend a college basketball game. Witnesses later confirmed they were seen at the game behaving normally and enjoying the evening. After the game ended around 10 p.m., the group began the drive home. But instead of heading south toward Yuba City, they somehow ended up traveling east, deep into the Plumas National Forest, an area of mountainous terrain, narrow roads, and heavy snowfall. Sometime during the night, Jared Madruga's car became stuck in the snow along a remote mountain road near the Yuba County line. The car was not damaged. It had fuel. It appeared capable of being driven once the snow cleared. The night was silent, except for wind moving through the trees. Snow reflected the moonlight, making the road appear brighter than it truly was. There were no nearby buildings, no traffic, just forest in every direction. Yet, the men abandoned the vehicle. This decision would become one of the central mysteries of the case. Despite freezing temperatures, despite inadequate clothing, and despite the availability of shelter inside the car, the five men left on foot and disappeared into the wilderness. When the men failed to return home, the families became alarmed. Search efforts began within days, involving local law enforcement, volunteers, and eventually the National Guard. Weeks passed with no sign of the group. Then, in early June of 1978, more than 3 months later, a motorcycle rider stumbled upon a Forest Service trailer deep in the mountains. Inside, investigators found the body of Ted Weher. Ted had died of starvation and exposure. Strangely, he had been wrapped in sheets, as though someone had tried to keep him warm. Nearby, there was evidence that canned food had been opened, but not eaten, despite Ted's extreme hunger. The trailer was not hidden or locked. It was a clearly visible structure designed for emergency use, stocked with supplies meant to keep someone alive during harsh conditions. Further searches uncovered the remains of Jack Hewitt and William Sterling, both found miles away from the trailer and from each other. Their deaths were attributed to exposure. Jack Madruga's remains were found near the abandoned car, suggesting he may never have made it far from the road. One man, however, was never found. Gary Matias vanished completely. His shoes were later discovered inside the Forest Service trailer, shoes that did not belong to Ted Weher. This detail raised disturbing questions about whether Gary had survived longer than the others, or possibly left the area alive. Investigators struggled to make sense of the evidence. One prevailing theory suggests that the men became disoriented after taking a wrong turn and panicked once the car became stuck. Fear, confusion, and cold may have driven them to make irrational decisions. Another theory focuses on Gary. Some speculate that a medical episode may have influenced the group's actions. However, friends and family insist Gary was stable and had never exhibited violent or irrational behavior. The most perplexing detail remains the Forest Service trailer. It contained food, bedding, and heating supplies that could have sustained Ted for weeks. Yet, much of it went unused. Why didn't they stay in the car? Why didn't they fully use the supplies? Why did they separate? And what exactly happened to Gary? Some have suggested foul play, but there has never been evidence of violence or an outside attacker. The terrain itself, cold, dark, and unforgiving, remains the most likely killer. But the unanswered questions refuse to go away.